Hey friends, I hope the morning's treating you well. I want to tell you a story today about how the road is not for everybody. Some of you are musicians or you're songwriters and people tell you all the time you ought to tour, and maybe when you went out to tour it just wasn't for you, but you didn't want to say it out loud because everybody expects that's what you should do. I mean, this can be anything you want it to be. You know, if you're playing guitar and writing songs and stuff like that, it can be whatever you want it to be. And people will ask Amy, my partner, Amy Lashley, all the time, you know, or they'll ask me mostly, why doesn't Amy go out on the road with you? And there's not enough time to explain all the reasons because there's a lot to it, you know, but I just say, it's not for everybody, you know, it's not all fun. I'm going to tell you a little story today that might serve as an example as to why some people don't go out on the road. I was, this might have been 20 years ago. Amy and I had been together for a year or two, so somewhere in there. And I don't remember whether I played gigs on this run or not. I must have played a couple gigs, but we drove, I was still living in Indianapolis. This was before we moved to Nashville. We drove out to Colorado, and some friend of ours had a place in Breckenridge, and they would get together with have some friends out over New Year's Eve and just have a really mellow New Year's, like a few days hanging out. Really nice people in a beautiful environment, and it was a really good time. So we drove out there, and when we started getting up into higher altitudes, Amy got a migraine, and she's like would get really scared and say, "Oh my God, I'm getting a migraine." And now I would hear people say they had migraines, and it would be like a bad headache, but they would still go out to eat, you know, so I didn't really know what a migraine was. I'd never seen anything quite like this for her. And she said it was the first one that she had had in 5 or 7 years, but she had some kind of a medication. I believe it's called Midrin, it's a prescription, and when she would start getting the symptoms, she would take this pill, and it would just kind of dull everything, and then she would go into her room, you know, with all the lights out and just sleep it off, and it wouldn't get terrible. It would be bad, but it wouldn't get terrible. And so I guess we found out later that changing altitudes, like severe altitudes, brings on migraines. And you know, Breckenridge is like 11,000 feet above sea level, so she got a migraine, and since she hadn't had them for 5 or 7 years, I believe she only had 2 pills with her. So like the next day when we're in Breckenridge, she gets another migraine, and same deal where she takes the pill and then now she doesn't have any more. And we stayed around for a couple days and acclimated. And when we were leaving, we went down through Colorado Springs and the Garden of the Gods. Beautiful, beautiful rock formations and such, really beautiful area. I had a medium format camera, I had an old Zeiss Iconoflex, and had a Kiev 88, which I've later found out recently it's pronounced Kiev, but a Russian-made camera that my buddy Todd gave me. And I'm setting up and I'm gonna like make photographs of these beautiful rock formations. And Amy was like, "Oh my God, oh my God." I'm like, "What?" I mean, we just got out of the car, and she's, I'm getting a migraine, and she's like, "I don't know what." She starts really kind of freaking out because she's like, "I'm out of pills," and I guess it comes on from flashing lights, is what she says. So if you're driving through woods and the sun is low and there's the flashing of the trees as they're going by, the light through the trees, that would bring it on. Going to a rock show, the stage lights, you know, the strobes and stuff like that. So I'm not sure what brought it on. Maybe just the coming down from the elevation of Breckenridge down to something lower, but she's just like, "Oh my God." And she's really, you can tell she's really worried. And I'm thinking, well, the last couple weren't that bad. So I'd never seen anything. And I put everything back in the car and thought, well, the only thing I can do is start driving back towards Indianapolis, and maybe this will fade. And she's just like, keep driving, keep driving. So we end up making our way to 70, and we're heading east. And by the time we got almost to the Kansas border in Colorado, we're pulling over every 10 miles and she's puking. and it's getting really bad. And she keeps having to pull over, and we're making no time at all, and she just keeps getting worse and worse. And I thought, man, we got to just sleep this off or something. So I'm watching, and somewhere in western Kansas, not far into Kansas at all, I see a sign for some hotels, a mom and pop joint. I pull off the exit. There's a hotel right there. I check in. We go in, and I'm thinking she's just going to sleep it off. And it just keeps getting worse. When you think it can't get any worse, it gets really bad. And she's in the bathroom, throwing up, just dry heaves. I'm sorry if this is gross, but it's hard to explain it without this. And I come in at one point, and she's just like laying in a fetal position, like next to the toilet, with her head on the floor of a dirty ass hotel room. And I'm just like, this is bad. This is really, really bad. So I go up to the counter at the hotel. I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, man, is there a hospital nearby? And he's like, what's the matter? And I said, well, my girlfriend's in really bad shape. Is there a hospital? And he said, man, there just happens to be a hospital in this town. It's just a few miles away from us. And we got really lucky. I carried her out to the car, and we drove to the hospital. It's a little hospital, it's an emergency room we went up to, and there was nobody else in there, just us and the people that worked there. There's no other patients in the emergency room I saw. And I explained, I'm like, man, she's having a migraine, and she has the really bad migraines, I guess, and she doesn't have any medication. She's out of it, and they're like, okay. So we go into this room where the nurses keep checking on her, and a doctor finally comes in. I try to explain everything to him. He's nice, and trying to explain everything to him of how, can you help her? Can you do something to help her? And he leaves. And I'm like, all right, we're finally going to get some help. And I'm just sitting there, and time goes by, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and there's a bathroom right off of wherever this room where we're at, and she's laying on the floor in there, just completely out of it. I'm half convinced she's dying. And a nurse finally kind of walks by, and I say, excuse me, ma'am, where's the doctor? When's he going to do something? And she kind of pulls me aside, and she says, I don't know how to tell you this, but the doctor thinks you guys are junkies, and he's not going to give her anything. And I immediately, like, what? The doctor thinks you're junkies. So I immediately, about to go through the roof, and I kind of like take a deep breath, try to calm myself down. Now, get yourself in my head. I've never drank. I don't smoke pot. I don't do anything. And Amy, it's like the same way. She have maybe 10 drinks a year, glass of wine here and there. And they're convinced, I'm like rolling up my sleeves. I'm like, do you see tracks here? We're not, what are you talking about? And she says, I'm sorry, but the doctor says, he thinks you're junkies, and he's not going to give her anything. So at that point, I just sat and thought, all right, man, be calm, get in control of the situation, and think. And I'm thinking as quick as I can, and I just said to her, is there anything that the doctor could give her to make this better that a junkie would not want? And she kind of looked at me, like for the first time, she kind of maybe believed me that I wasn't a junkie. And she says, well, wait right here. I'll go talk to him. And when he came back, he ended up giving her, I seem to remember it being Thorazine. I thought it was like 500 milligrams, but I don't remember. I just remember it was something from a Ramones song that I remembered from that. And it completely knocked her out. I mean, completely knocked her out. And, no more of the pain of whatever the hell was going on. And I have a pharmacist friend that I asked later on, a couple weeks later what it was, and she said, that's pretty much a liquid lobotomy. Now, I don't know. that it may, I don't remember if that's exactly what it was or not, but that's what I always in my brain remember it by. Some of the doctors out there and pharmacists and such have some idea what I'm talking about, and maybe you can correct me in the comments. But we ended up checking out of the hotel, or I mean checking out of the, going back to the hotel from the hospital, and she slept all night. I mean, all night. I had to like wake her up a couple times, like, are you okay? You know, sleeping that hard. The next day, we got up, I woke her up, and I'm like, can you drive, you know, can you ride in the car? And she's like, yeah, she's just way out of it still, way out of it. And I said, can you ride in the car? And she says, yeah. So I started driving back towards Indianapolis. I drove all the way back with like blankets over her, you know, or like coats over her so that no light started flashing. And she slept all the way from western Kansas to Indianapolis. And by the time we got there, she kind of was coming out of the fog of whatever he gave her. And I remember we got the bill, as if all of that isn't bad enough. Then you get the bill, and it was a lot. It was like $1,000 for whatever the hell the shot he gave her, you know, for the medication, one shot, like $1,000. It was like $2,000 for the hospital visit, and it was almost $2,000 for the doctor's fee. And it was just ridiculous. And you guys have been through all of that. You understand. If you're American, you know how that goes. But we, you know, when people ask me, you know, why doesn't Amy go on the road? It's like, man, not everybody is suited for it. And there's nothing wrong with not wanting to put yourself in those situations. Some people are more sensitive to their environment. And when you have to be somewhere every single day at a certain time, no matter what, you know, some people aren't suited for that, and I don't blame them. This can be anything you want it to be. You know, if you want to be in the arts and make music and share it with people, it doesn't have to be, you know, jumping in a car and going to every town in America, playing every dive in America to 12 people, hoping somebody listens. It doesn't have to be that. You know, you live on the internet. You can play to your phone, you know, and people will watch it. You can sit out in your backyard and talk to folks as you're sweating and wishing you had your coffee out here with you. But I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about. I'm going to go ahead and link one of Amy's songs right here so you guys can hear Amy's music, and I think you guys will enjoy it. And I will see you somewhere down the road. Much love to you.